40-foot buffer and the kind of trees that were chosen, which really were not going to provide the canopy necessary to block the light. In fact, the light went up higher, it didn't take down what it should have been.
They got him on the mic, so he can just move around.
How far is it?
Yeah, and the ordinance clearly says it's not supposed to
Stay in that area.
Zooming it out. Just to be safe.
But now it's up to us to try to find a way to make all that happen and bring it back.
I would not have known that. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah. In fact, one of my neighbors 10 years ago, we were number 2 at that time.
But I don't know if this is different.
Behind Highland Village.
Whatever. All right, guys. You want me to get your...
Yeah, just because, just over that way.
We're looking at ways to do that. Ways to do it better and cheaper. So, we're going to be looking into whatever possibilities may be out there. And we can find another way to deliver a higher quality product at a low cost. You guys enjoyed the meeting. Thank you.
Can I get
the line was right over the rim. So it's like,
another one with a
I love the work. You never told me that. You never said this. And I pull it out and say, this day at this time, you got this in mind.
that's what I'm trying. Well, it is, but what I'm trying to say is
Good to see you.
just these reserve seconds, right?
Sorry?
Just these on the end reserve.
Yeah, for somebody.
I'll let you know if somebody comes.
Roydale.
I do report chase to
I'm not going to be a pain. I'm going to just...
Hey Greg, how you doing? Good to see you. How you get up on the horse.
What are you guys doing tonight?
Camera
All four of these seats?
Well, this one
she's got a big honey, doesn't she?
You'll have to take that over too because I want to live.
Well, the camera's there, so I would assume she'd take one of those two. Good. Thank you. That would help. Everybody's got to try to tell you how to do it.
All right, boys. Drop a cup. Very good. Thank you.
That's okay. Go right ahead. Make yourself happy. Hey.
I think they're like if you don't mind. All right. If you don't mind, you want to go on the end? No, we would have gotten here.
South and west of the pond. And it's north of Justin. Okay, that would work. Oh, now Brian isn't that far from you. Okay.
We can have everyone grab a seat. We'll go ahead and get started. Good evening. On behalf of the Northwest ISD Board of Trustees and Administration, it is my honor to welcome you to Byron Nelson High School. My name is Josh Wright, and I'm currently serving as the president of the Northwest ISD Board of Trustees. It is engaged citizens like you who make our communities and schools stronger. I appreciate your interest and commitment to being here tonight. Your presence says a lot about you and your desire to support this community. and I thank you for that. There's a couple of folks I'd like to introduce real quick. We have the new principal of Byron Nelson High School, Dr. Ron Myers, Dr. Myers, and our superintendent of schools, Dr. Karen Rick. At this time, I'm proud to introduce one of our own, Byron Nelson High School sophomore and Eagle Scout, Emmett Rasmussen.
I'd like to first start off by thanking the Congressman for allowing us to be here. As he said, my name is Emmett Rasmussen. I'm from the Roanoke Troop 632, and tonight we are here to assist with the flag ceremony. But on a personal note, I'd actually like to thank the Congressman because he sent a congratulatory letter to me, thanking me, saying congratulations when I got my Eagle. That means a lot to me, so thank you, sir. Color Guard, attention. May the audience please rise. Color Guard, advance. The Color Guard tonight is held together by Riley Stark holding the American flag, Ethan McLeod holding the Texas flag, and Ethan Gatlin, Arthur Gatlin, Riley Lillywhite, and Fuller Shirts for assisting. Color Guard, prepare to post the colors. Scout salute. Color Guard, post colors. May the audience please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And now the Texas Pledge. All in honor of the
Texas flag, I pledge allegiance to you, one state, and God, one individual.
2. The audience may be seated. Color Guard, report. Color Guard, dismiss.
Thank you. Our students sure do make us proud. It is a pleasure to have a few of our elected officials with us here tonight. I'd like to introduce you to a few of them now. Would you please stand when I call your name? Scott Steer, the District Director for State Rep Matt Krause. Scooter Garish, Mayor of Roanoke. Tim Birch, Constable Precinct 4 of Denton County. Greg Lamont, Mayor Pro Tem of Trophy Club. Nick Sanders, Mayor of the Town of Trophy Club. Jim Barrow, Councilman, Town of Trophy Club. Leon Jones with the City Council of Roanoke. Andy Eads, Denton County Commissioner. Diane Edmondson, Denton County GOP Chair. If there are any elected officials that I have failed to mention, would you please stand? Thank you. Good evening. It is a privilege to have the opportunity and learn with Congressman Burgess tonight. I know that you share my appreciation for his willingness to be here. Please join me in welcoming Congressman Michael Burgess.
tonight is for you. I have a few things that I feel like I do need to say, but mostly I want to hear what is on your mind. The immediate past mayor of Trophy Club, Mayor White, is here. So good to see you. You've been to many of our events over the years, and appreciate your attendance as well. So last week was kind of an action-packed week in the United States Capitol. First, just a housekeeping detail. You see there's a camera here, and we're going to set up a microphone over here for questions. It actually works out that we're all in the frame. But I do want to remind you that everything we say here tonight is on the record. So this will be the official transcript of tonight's proceedings. Obviously, we all want to be respectful of our neighbors, and whether we agree completely or not, we want to hear all sides. I would just remind you that it is quite possible that anything you say in a forum like this can beat you home on YouTube, because I've had the experience. Now, with that said, this last week in Washington there was a lot going on. And the week ended with the passage of a bill to help with the crisis that exists currently in the lower Rio Grande Valley sector of the Texas border. How did we get there? A lot of people have opined a lot of different things, but as the month of July wore on, the president said, I'm going to have $3.7 billion to fix this problem. Well, wait a minute, you knew it was going on since November, and you haven't bothered to try to fix it yet. How is $3.7 billion going to make a difference? So, in fact, that amount of money was significantly reduced. The Senate, right before they left town, passed, or in fact could not pass, their own version, which gave the president $2.7 billion. The House bill that eventually passed was for some $680 million. Not an emergency appropriation, but reprogramming money that had previously been appropriated for the Department of Homeland Security, Department of Health and Human Services to address this problem. There was a great deal of consternation on the side of some of us who were serving in the House that the bill that came forward in the middle of the week and on Thursday morning really didn't do enough to fix the problem. And, I was asked several times, are you going to be okay with this? And I said, I would be better if it fixed the problem, but I don't see us as doing that. There were some changes made during those late hours on Thursday night and early in the morning on Friday morning. And what eventually emerged was something that would, in fact, back up the border state governors. Governor Perry had called up the National Guard as it is his responsibility to do so when he sees a threat to the state. The problem is that if the governor calls up the National Guard, not the president, if the governor calls up the National Guard, that's paid for out of state funding. We felt that if a border state governor felt that we need to call up the National Guard, that should be paid for by the federal government. So actually that was included in the bill that passed Friday night. One of the big things was suspension of the deferred action for childhood arrivals. Remember, this was a policy enacted unilaterally by the president in July of 2012. And when you look back at the numbers, and I know people have written opinion pieces on both sides of this issue, but to me it's pretty apparent. When you look back at when did the numbers really start to go north on the number of people coming across the border, it was right after that June 20th of 2012 statement by the president that he was no longer going to remove people that came into this country as children, as he said, through no fault of their own. You can't expect a family in Central America to kind of work through the nuances of what a presidential directive is. What they heard was, if you get here, you get to stay. And then this was marketed by cartels, by child traffickers. They position themselves as social workers. They advertise on TV, hey, give us $3,000, $4,000, $8,000. We will get you to the United States, and the president is not going to send you back. So that was a very effective marketing strategy on the part of people who are basically part of the criminal element, and they took advantage of the deferred action for childhood arrivals. In my opinion, that's what lit the fuse on this, and if you weren't willing to suspend that, at least for a little while, to get this thing under control, you weren't serious about fixing the problem. There's also, you've heard a lot of talk about a 2008 law that affected the asylum issue, and that there need to be changes in the 2008 law. Treat the children from Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador, the same as you treat the children from Mexico and Canada. And that language actually was included in the bill that finally passed. Now, bill passed the House. It wasn't just a straight party line vote. In fact, we had a Texas Democrat, a representative from one of the border areas down in by Laredo, who voted with us. The Senate, remember, left town without passing their bill. So at this point, as it stands, the House has passed a bill, the Senate has not. I think the Senate should come back and pass something, even if it's a $2.7 billion bill that I could never accept. This is how things are supposed to work. Now, for the president to say at this point, oh, Congress is broken, they're not working together, so I'm just going to take care of this myself. Actually, that would be the wrong response to this. The House has acted. The House has put together a bill that was supported by the majority of the members of the House of Representatives, and it's up to the Senate now to do something. Come together. We all saw how a bill becomes law on Congress Rock or whatever it was. I'm just a bill up on Capitol Hill. This is what happens. You go to conference and you work up the rough edges. It would not be the right response for the president to do something unilaterally. If that happens, someone was kind enough to point out to me that I'm on a 5-week vacation. I assured him that if I was on vacation, I wouldn't be with him. But if there is a necessity to go back to Washington to vote, I am perfectly willing to do so. If we're not voting, I think my job is to be here with you and listening and learning from what's going on in the district. But if something comes forward, sure, we go back to Washington and we vote on it. Another thing I want to point out, because it kind of got lost in a lot of the hubbub of last week, was the action that occurred on a bill to provide some emergency relief to the VA system. 40 years ago, I was an intern at the Dallas VA. When I was an intern at Parkland Hospital, I spent several months at the Dallas VA. Things weren't great then. In some ways, they're better. In some ways, they're worse. But the emergence of 2 schedules, 2 lists for a veteran to be given an appointment within 14 days, there was also a clandestine list that was kept in a drawer somewhere of people that were waiting to come in. Not only is that wrong, it should be a fireable offense. Right now, you can't fire anyone at the VA, but it also quite likely is a criminal offense. And if it weren't Eric Holder was in charge of the Justice Department, I would expect that someone would be investigating that. The VA bill that passed this week was to allow emergency funding. Yeah, for people who haven't been able to get in to get something taken care of, get them in. If the VA does not have the physical space, the physician to see them, let them go to someone who is willing to see them outside the VA system. And for anyone who lives more than 40 miles away from a VA facility, let them also have the ability to see a physician in the community who's willing to serve. This is not a new concept. Many of you may remember Tom Osborne, who was the actual coach at Nebraska when I was much younger. He was a member of Congress, and this was a bill that he put forward for several years while he was in the House. The same concept that was valid in 2004, 2005 is valid today, and it did pass the House, it did pass the Senate. I don't think the president has signed it yet, but I actually don't think there's any quarrel that the president will sign it. Does that solve the problem? Not by a long shot. And there is an enormous amount of work yet to be done on this, but this was applying first aid to a problem that was growing worse by the day. You saw the news reports, you saw the stories of veterans who were denied care, and it really unfortunately looked as if some veterans may have died while waiting for that care. It's wrong, it's unconscionable, and it needed to be fixed. Finally, the last thing I would say, today is the first day of a ceasefire. 3-day ceasefire that was struck between Netanyahu and Hamas. I was grateful that the ceasefire occurred. I will say that it is important for this country to stand with Israel, the oldest democracy in the Middle East. I was taking allies since 1948. I thought Benjamin Netanyahu, when he said, "Don't second guess me in the future," you know what? I'm with you, dude. I think that is the right response. Secretary Kerry had a very bad week last week, but not nearly as bad as the people who live in those neighborhoods on both sides. of the border there that are receiving the rocket fire, one side or the other. The state of Israel cannot allow rockets to continue to rain down on its people. It cannot allow the tunnels to be built where their citizens can be kidnapped and taken away. So I think Benjamin Netanyahu did the right thing. He took the right action. I'm grateful he didn't wait for President Obama to say it's okay. He went ahead and did the right thing. Now, there are a ton of other issues going on, and I've been provided some lists from some of you, but rather than me try to go through those and remember all of those, I'm just going to open it up to you. We're going to have a microphone set up over here. Again, I'll remind you that we're both being recorded on camera. So if you've got someone who says, oh my gosh, I can't believe I forgot Congressman Burgess was having his town hall and I missed the whole thing, tell them not to fear. They'll be able to watch the whole 4 hours on YouTube. And it will be available in perpetuity. So we'll try to have that up. Eric's going to set up the microphone. I welcome you to the microphone, and let's have a conversation about things that are happening in the world. It's important to hear from you. There are times like Friday night where I've got to make a decision in a very short period of time. I'm very grateful that when that occurs, I generally feel the same way as about 80% of the district. But if you've got a differing view, I encourage you to come forward. Or if you've got the same view, I encourage you to come forward and let's hear from you.
Congressman Burgess. My name is Sharon. I live in Fort Worth. Only for the last 2.5 months I'm into Texas. And I'm wondering, thank you. I'm wondering, considering all of Obama's transgressions of the Constitution and trying to take the power away from Congress, why he's not impeached, why there is a lawsuit brought up by Boehner instead of impeachment, and why you and the other congressmen did not stay in office and bring about impeachment. Thank you.
Let me just ask you a question. What is your goal?
What is my goal? I want to have Obama impeached. I want to restore the Glass-Steagall law that was dismantled in 1999 that caused the economy to fall and caused all the foreclosures, especially in Southern California where I'm from. And I would like to see people get back to work.
Okay, fair enough. And of course, you recall it was year 2000. Bill Clinton was the president when Glass-Steagall was.
Yes, I'm very aware of that.
So on the issues that you brought up, impeachment is one thing, but the Senate obviously has to vote to remove. And that's a pretty high bar. It's 66 senators have to vote in order to remove. And you'll recall in 1998 when Bill Clinton went through a similar problem. Well, Bill Clinton was different because he did lie to the FBI. He lied to the grand jury. Really, the offenses there were pretty serious. Even notwithstanding, not even every Republican voted in favor of removal. I was not in Congress at the time. Whether I was disappointed or not by that, I mean, it serves as a pretty stark reminder. Richard Nixon did not. Articles of impeachment were drafted by the Judiciary Committee, but he was not impeached. He resigned his office before that could happen. One of the reasons I feel like he did resign was because he lost the support of Republican senators. Obviously, every Democrat, they're waiting to remove Richard Nixon. They have been for years. But it was when Republican senators, like Howard Baker, went to the White House and said, what has happened is something we cannot be okay with, and we will vote to remove. And that's when President Nixon realized he lost his support. In my natural lifetime, it is not likely going to happen that Democratic senators will vote to remove a Democratic president. It just doesn't occur. So the lawsuit is a measure to bring some of that accountability back. The House, this lawsuit that's going on right now is different. In the Bush administration, Lloyd Doggett and John Conyers, I mean, people brought lawsuits, Dennis Kucinich brought lawsuits against the president all the time. And they were all dismissed, saying you lack standing as a member of Congress to sue the president. You go back and do your job, and the president will do his job, and that dispute will resolve itself. But this one's different. This is the House of Representatives bringing a lawsuit against the president because it's fairly narrow, and it's narrow on purpose, so that it doesn't get distracted with other things, the nuances of foreign policy, for example. This is focused on a single section of the Affordable Care Act of Obamacare, where the president unilaterally suspended the employer mandate, and as a consequence of doing so, suspended all of the data collection that would occur if the employer mandate had gone into effect. The law is very clear. I didn't bring my copy of Obamacare with me, but I can read you the enacting clause of both the individual mandate and the employer mandate are identical. So if it is okay to suspend one, it should be okay to suspend the other. The president did not do that. He just suspended the employer mandate, I think for reasons that were purely political. Had the chaos that was visited on the individual small group market last fall and visited on the employer market, it would have been chaotic in this country. So they made a decision that hey, this Affordable Care Act is not working as intended. Let's just put part of it aside. But does the president have the ability to do that when it is a law that really the president participated in the writing of the law? The president, of course, worked to get it passed in the Senate, worked to get it passed in the House. The president signed into law himself in a ceremony in the White House. He defended it before the Supreme Court. So is it okay now that the president unilaterally just takes part of it off the table? We say, no, that's not right. We have three branches of government for a reason. There is a legislative branch, and there's a legislative remedy that needs to come forward, come to the Congress, and talk to us about that. That's the way it is supposed to work. I was, like you, I was not convinced about the lawsuit when the discussion first occurred. I do sit on the Rules Committee, and that's where the testimony was taken from witnesses. We had 4 law professors who testified in front of us for hour upon hour one day. I'm very, very grateful that I'd gone to medical school, not law school, after that endeavor. But Jonathan Turley, who is a Democratic Georgetown professor, very liberal, and he said, I voted for Obama twice. I believe in national health care, but this is not right what the president has done. So never mind President Obama for a moment. Are you going to be okay in 2 or 3 years' time when a Republican president does exactly the same thing because now the bar has been reset? So Jonathan Turley was very much in favor of us proceeding with the lawsuit. And one of the Democratic professors who was there testifying on behalf of the Democrats, Mr. Dellinger, who was President Carter's Solicitor General, I asked him very specifically, I said, now look, in a couple of years' time, Ted Cruz is inaugurated as president, and he says, I want to repeal I did it to the facts, correct. He says, I want to repeal every syllable of Obamacare, but until I can do that, until I can get the Congress to do that, I'm just going to suspend the individual mandate, because that's what makes this law so coercive and unlike any other law we've ever seen. So I said to Mr. Dellinger, can President Cruz then suspend the individual mandate? And he said, no, he could not, because a President Cruz would not have supported the law in the first place. It's where I felt I had fallen into a parallel dimension. In other words, it's okay for a Democratic president to work outside the law, outside the confines of the Constitution, not a Republican president. The lawsuit is important, and will it hold up? Will the question of standing be answered affirmatively for Congress? Maybe, maybe not. But it's much different from an individual member of Congress bringing the suit, where you can argue that standing doesn't occur. The institution should have standing in this regard. It's a 50-50 proposition, but my opinion is it should go forward.
Can I just say that President Nixon would have been impeached had he not resigned? And I think his crimes are insignificant compared to what Obama has done. And it's not just Obamacare, it's many other different things. And I think impeachment is a much better solution. I think the lawsuit is just a tactic.
But if you would never achieve removal, just as in 1998 with Bill Clinton.
They removed Nixon. I mean, it's worth a try, I think.
All right, thank you for your opinion. Appreciate it.
Hello.
Seems like we've been here before.
You remember. It has been a while since I've been here. I appreciate your time to have the town meeting. I know some of your colleagues don't have these very very often. And I appreciate you having.
Otherwise, I wouldn't get a chance to talk to you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Since I first started coming to these, which goes back 2.5, 3 years ago, I've been asking you the same question over and over again, and you said you had to look into it, study it, find out more about it, and I think it's been 2.5, 3 years now. You should be pretty well educated on it, and that's Glass-Steagall. There have been many people in very high places that have been warning that if we don't get back to the Glass-Steagall, we're in for some really catastrophic events in our financial system. Thomas Mahoney, Vice Chairman of the Federal Reserve, or the FDIC, has warned very clearly many times that we're on the verge of another blowout. And if we don't pass Glass-Steagall, he's calling for Glass-Steagall. Many people, even some of Wall Street's retired or current leaders, have actually come out publicly and said, if we don't pass Glass-Steagall, the system is going to bury us all. And I guess, my question is, are you on the side of separating Wall Street from the local banks like it was under Glass-Steagall, or are you in favor of continuing the bailouts with Wall Street? I don't see Wall Street being our friend. And they lost on gambling debts, and the debts are staggering. They're beyond imagination. And I don't see how we can bail it out, and I don't see how under Frank Dodd bill how we can bail it in, which means they're going to start taking our deposits out of our bank accounts. They're doing that already in Europe. So the head of the European Union has come out publicly and said we're headed for a complete meltdown. And so I'd just like to ask for you one more time to get on board with Glass-Steagall. Marcy Kaptur has a bill, as you well know, and I would really appreciate it. And I think everybody in your district would appreciate you leading the fight to reinstate Glass-Steagall.
I have spent a good deal of time with this issue. There is not unanimity of opinion. There are new people who believe you cannot turn back the clock. Now, I like what Richard Fisher had to say, and I was really hopeful that he would be made president of or chairman of the Federal Reserve, but that did not happen. Familiar with some of the papers that he has written, where he, realistically, Glass-Steagall was repealed in the year 2000, and the world is a different place today than it was in the year 2000. The types of protections that President Fisher was talking about instituting to put that bright line back in between the deposit window and the investment window does make some sense, but I'm not certain that you will achieve what you desire by simply repeal of Glass-Steagall, and it may come with some significant consequences. It is something that I do continue to study. In fact, I talked to Marcy Kaptur just Thursday evening as we were finishing up some votes. Actually, we're talking more about Ukraine than Glass-Steagall, but it did come up. So I'm aware of the issue. Their folks are down there handing me information every afternoon when I go to vote, and I do look at it. But I will just tell you, there's not, I don't know if you can roll back the clock on this one. I think there are some protections that can be built in. You'll recall I voted against all of that bailout stuff back in 2008, and would do so again. But at the same time, just turning the clock back on Glass-Steagall, I'm not sure it gets you where you want to be.
I don't understand why it wouldn't separate local community banks from Wall Street. It did before. Why wouldn't it now?
Because the industry is quite different. And you and I have talked about this before. The banks that, they're really the large banks that are only 5 or 8 of them left at this point.
And they're in worse shape now than they were in 2008.
And I think at this point we're going to agree to disagree, and we'll talk more about this in the future, I feel fairly certain.
Well, I hope you will reconsider.
Thank you.
John Davis. Hey, good to see you again. I'm a software developer. I'm not a big fan of the comprehensive immigration reform. I'm hoping that you were, as far as what the Senate passed, you were wholeheartedly against that bill.
That would be a good assumption.
Yes, I would hope, I think. But one aspect of it, and I don't want to say numbers when I don't really know the answer, but I believe I've heard as far as technical type jobs, I've heard some people say double the number of immigrants, some people say unlimited. Personally, I think, and also it's propagated constantly that there's not enough workers in this country, technical workers, when it's really not true. But I think I heard most graduates in the sciences don't get a job. So it's really just, so anyway, I just encourage you to vote against that. I'm very troubled with the Speaker of the House, to the leadership, the Republican, saying he's hell-bent on passing immigration reform. I'm hoping it's not the Senate bill that he's speaking of, but I'm a little surprised it hasn't passed yet, because I think if it did went to vote, it would pass. Do you think that, and I know that there's a few conservatives keeping it from happening, or at least I think I know that. Do you think that we, or those of us against it, can stop it?
I don't know the answer to your question. So far, it has been yes. The election that happens in November is pretty important in this regard. Now, it's interesting, last night I did this in Frisco, Little Hill, and there was someone who got up and had the opposite view from what you're talking about this evening, and criticized me for voting against the bill. To be perfectly honest with you, I don't remember it, but it was back in 2011, something that would have increased the number of technical visas. We got 11 million people out of work, citizens out of work. Let's fix that first, and then we can talk about anything else we want to talk about.
Tech jobs, from what I've heard too, the salaries are flatlined for several years, so there's really no need for it, other than some corporations want cheap labor. Anyway, thank you for your continued support, and everybody, if you're against comprehensive immigration reform, encourage him. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
Todd. That's my same name. His name's Logan. I just kind of want to go over your voting record. At the end, I kind of have a question. First of all, you voted on cuts to Medicare, Medicaid, and reduce Social Security benefits. You also voted to eliminate nutritional programs that serve 21 million students a year and 4.7 million impoverished seniors. Just last week, he voted for H.R. Bill 4315, which weakens the Endangered Species Act. Also, you fight the EPA on public health and environmental regulations. I mean, the corporations benefit from this. Why? Because they spend less money to clean up the air we breathe. And I want to make sure he has some clean air to breathe when he grows up. Also, the farm bill you voted on included $195 billion in taxpayer-funded corporate welfare. Oil and gas is $12 billion a year in taxpayer-funded corporate welfare. And I just wonder, is anybody here support exporting our natural gas and oil? Because he does. So no, yeah. And also, I agree with this. 70% of Americans support raising the minimum wage to $10.10 an hour. Yes, studies have shown that 500,000 jobs will be lost, But if 10 workers lost their jobs, but 1,000 families were lifted off welfare, we'd probably say that'd be a pretty good trade-off. But corporations oppose rates and minimum wage, and I think you do as well. So your voting record, I have more here, but I want to keep everybody here. But your voting record shows support for corporations, which creates a burden, an unfair burden on my family and people in this audience. And this is why we're frustrated with Congress. I think you have a 9 to 12% approval rating. No one is representing our needs. The people in this room. It's become we the corporations, not we the people. So my question to you, is there any way that we can identify that you're somehow sponsored through a corporation or a trade group, like the American Petroleum Institute, Monsanto, or something? Because I just don't feel like you're representing the people anymore based on what your voting record has shown so far.
I fundamentally disagree. I don't think, I mean, we got some points there that we could argue about. I mean, Farm Bill, I did vote for a Farm Bill because it had what I consider to be some improvements in it.
Even Freedom Works said that was the most egregious corporate welfare.
On the final vote on the Farm Bill, I voted against it on the conference report that came back from the Senate because even the modest improvements, the modest reforms we got in the House passed bill were all removed when it came out of conference with the Senate. So yeah, I voted for it to move the process along, and I thought it was important to try to get some of these reforms in place. But at the end of the day, when the final vote was taken on the Farm Bill, there were no reforms. It's a policy that's been around for 80 years, created perhaps for good valid reason in 1933, but I wasn't around then, and I certainly don't remember why it was created, but many of those programs quite honestly need to be phased out. And as you know, the largest part of the Farm Bill, the largest expenditure, was in for the SNAP program, the food stamp program. And the program has grown enormously over the last 5 years. All of the growth from the stimulus that was passed in 2009, which I was against, only just recently came out of the SNAP program. Clearly it was on an unsustainable path, and I thought needed to be pared back.
The SNAP program has increased the participants because of the recession rate. So
yeah, the president keeps telling us that he's created so many jobs, the recession is over.
No, I'm just telling you why it's increased. That's why it's because of jobs.
Yeah, I don't, again, I don't know that we're going to agree on that point. But I appreciate you being here. I appreciate the fact that we do disagree on a number of issues. That's what this is all about. So I appreciate you having your voice heard. I appreciate you bringing them up tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Howdy, my name is Jaron Thompson. I'm a high school physics teacher in Keller.
Good for you.
Thank you. I've got a few things I want to discuss. I don't know if you want me to bring up a topic and then we'll discuss a bit and then go on to the next one, or should I just give everything at once?
We'll start and see how it goes.
Okay. Well, the first thing, I'm aware of our federal government. Back in 1979, we created Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda is, it's Arabic, it means the base. We gave them a base so that way they could fight Russia for us, give them their own Vietnam, which essentially was successful. Since then, our government's been involved with funding and training and supplying Al-Qaeda. They've been involved with attempts to topple the Syrian government, and we have been caught as aiding them in that process 3 times. And since that time, Al-Qaeda has changed their name to ISIS. They're invading Iraq right now, and now President Obama wants to give them $500 million to continue this process, while on the other hand, our military, I've got buddies in the military coming back, they're telling me it's an entire racket. They're fighting for their own lives and for their buddy next to them instead of fighting an actual bad guy, while here in our homeland, which by the way is a German term, in our homeland, the TSA is groping us, filling us up at the airports, they're in subways, they're at the sports stadiums, all trying to capture Al-Qaeda terrorists which we've created and we're funding, and we've caught zero, TSA has caught zero terrorists. So I find there's a dichotomy there where on the one hand we're involved with that nonsense, but on the other hand, we're expected to live under this fear of terror that we are causing at the same time. So that's my first point, and I'm aware that Obama's fully behind that. And you discuss that, or shall I just go through the rest of my list?
Well, I'm not quite sure what your question is. I mean, I disagree with some of the points you've listed, but I'm in agreement with some of the points you've listed. So let me just say this as far as Iraq and ISIS, because that's probably the most immediate and pressing concern. The authorization to use force in Iraq was passed in October of 2002, a few months before I got there. It was never repealed, even at the point in 2011 when all American troops were withdrawn. I wasn't sure I agreed with that. I was one of the last congressional delegations to go through Iraq in August of 2011. I was somewhat startled by the fact that all the places that we've been previously, where there'd been men, equipment, striker vehicles, MRAPs, it was all gone, just stripped down to the slabs. And General Austin at the time said, we've done everything we can do from a military standpoint. It is up to the Iraqi government now to pull together and create their country. Jefferson and Adams didn't like each other, but they still got over it and created America. We're glad they did. So if Dr. Alawi and Mr. al-Maliki can't stand each other, they still need to pull together for the sake of their country.
And I guess my point is, why are we sending our troops out there fighting when we can have them brought back home, fighting against a problem that we helped create?
Well, it did bring up an interesting point, because the authorization had never expired. So the president said first with 300 and then 500 advisors that were going back into Iraq. That begins to start to sound. Here's what I never understood. When all of the military was pulled out, again, I was there in August of 2011, and the last trucks left on December 23rd of 2011. You had to ask yourself, well, okay, there must be some contingency, there must be some strategy, there must be some plan if things really go bad, because we've kind of been through this before in our country's history, where we left the country we had been supporting and then they got taken over by the people that we purported were the bad guys. So we've seen that happen before. And my thought was there must be some strategy on the shelf that they're ready to pull off, or it's okay if it goes bad, and if it goes back. I mean, at the time, I was worried about Iran. I mean, that would be the logical bad actor in that neighborhood who would come in and misbehave and try to do a land grab or a power grab in their neighborhood. So I assumed that either there was a strategy to deal with it, or if it happened, it was okay. So I was a little startled. We had a briefing one night by DOD and State Department, and I asked that question, what was the strategy? And the basic answer I got was there wasn't one. I mean, they didn't say that, but that was the default answer because they couldn't answer the question. So I don't disagree with you. I mean, I think it was an oversight on Congress's part, not at some point to take back that authorization for the use of force in Iraq. I thought it was wrong that my leadership and the Senate leadership went down to the White House and said, oh, Mr. President, it's your problem, you deal with it. No, that is something that should come to Congress, and we should have to put our cards in and vote one way or the other. If there is to be a continued activity in Iraq, because, I mean, again, we've all seen this before, the mission creep, the acceleration that goes on. And then, to come back a year from now and say, oh, well, we're up to 12,000 troops. No, I don't want that. Let's talk about it before we ever get there. So that would be my impression. I don't know whether that comports with what you had to bring up tonight, but the anxiety that I feel over ISIS in Iraq doesn't seem like we had, number one, a strategy to deal with it, or Or number two, that if we decided to let him go, why are we now second guessing it? And if we are, please come back to Congress and make a justification for any money or troops that go over there. As far as Syria is concerned, you will recall last Labor Day weekend, almost a year ago now, many of us went back to Washington. We were home in our districts. We went back to Washington to register our disagreement with going into Syria. I think at that time it was going to be strategic bombing in the country of Syria, and basically stood up to our own leadership in the House and the Senate and the White House. And then the craziest of all things happened. John Kerry made some sort of comment about, well, we'll let Putin handle it, and then he did. And we didn't have to bomb Syria. So
yeah, Kerry said that if they're willing to give up their weapons, then we'll be cool with that. And Putin says, okay, we'll handle the transfer.
Yeah. So I don't know that we disagree on a lot of these things.
What about the TSA then?
The issue is, though, if there's going to be that kind of activity, it does need to come back to the legislative branch. It does need to involve the United States Congress. I don't know whether, I would not have voted for airstrikes in Syria, because it's hard to tell who the good guys and the bad guys are. And now, a year later, we see that even more with the ISIS stuff. We might have, in fact, as you're concerned about arming the Mujahideen in the late 70s, early 80s, may have led to some unintended consequences down the road. Same thing could have happened last Labor Day. So I was very much grateful that, for whatever reason, that the process was stopped. We heard today that there was a two-star general killed in Afghanistan.
Yeah, on the way here, yeah.
I got to ask myself, if the same thing's going to happen in Afghanistan that happened in Iraq, and it's not a conditions-based withdrawal, it's a calendar-based withdrawal, do it now. Don't wait for a date on the calendar. If it doesn't depend on conditions on the ground, if it is, well, I said we were going to be up by the end of 2014, and so we're going to wait for that date on the calendar. Don't wait. That would be my impression. Right. And I thank you for bringing these up.
Now, I know that there's talk about a mention of ball, and I'm fully behind that, because if the process that we started, it will wake up some people and say, oh, okay, we do need to straighten up our act and not have this overbearing, tyrannical process going on in the federal government. And I understand the point that you brought up. There's not the votes in the Senate. There needs to be a public case made before the people, and I get that. So let's take this a step at a time. Eric Holder refuses to do his job. I mean, he's the chief of the law enforcement officer. He has said that there's not a scintilla of evidence regarding the IRS, and he said that before there was ever an investigation or having seen any evidence. It's not random that he does this. Eric Holder is systematically, repeatedly blocking any attempts to get to a bomb. And when it comes to the VA, he's come out and he's said that he refuses to investigate veteran deaths at VA hospitals because, quote, it's not worth DOJ investigation. So on the one hand, we've got Eric Holder who's blocking everything, and then on the other hand, we have John Boehner, Speaker of the House, Republican. He lacks an interest in impeachment. He's been on national TV talking about not having interest in impeachment. And so I'm sure you've heard about there being blackmail for him to not pursue it, because then all the stuff that Boehner's involved in would come out and possibly kick him out of office. And so he's not going to do what's right. So we need to start, so what I suggest to you and spread to the rest of the officials up in Washington, impeach Eric Holder and impeach Boehner to send a message to Republicans and Democrats to show that's the second point.
You're aware that Eric Holder was held in both civil and criminal contempt of Congress, and that case is working its way through the court. There is the possibility that being found guilty of the criminal contempt charge could have some serious ramifications. And you could see in one of the hearings that happened in the judiciary, and I think it was Louis Gohmert, who said, well, you didn't care when we held him in contempt, and he blew up at Louis. He went right for the throat. So clearly it is something that's on his mind, and it's something that does bother him. It's it's not impossible to impeach a cabinet official. Doesn't happen very often. That
it would set a good precedent with what's going on now.
Well, the last time was right after the Civil War, so it's been 150 years. So.
Still.
Look, I'm not going to shed any tears with Eric Holder as the Water Attorney General. That's a given. We agree on that.
Okay. So I guess spread the word. Let's impeach Eric Holder, impeach Boehner. The next one.
I don't know that you actually can impeach the Speaker of the House.
At least put it up for a Republican vote to kick him out of the speakership. I don't know when that's supposed to happen, but he doesn't need to be where he's at right now.
Well, where that happens, so that you know, it would be right after the November election, probably the day or two after Veterans Day when the Republican Congress collects up in Washington. That's when those decisions will be made.
So I'm also aware of the president permitting with the border issue going on. I saw the long list, and a lot of the questions were answered through that. My big concern about the border right now is the infectious diseases coming across.
Yeah, me too.
Just yesterday, there was a report that came out from the CBP. It was a leaked report. I forgot to print it out. That talked about how it's not just Central American and South American country people coming across the border. We've got Ebola-ridden people flooding across the border, and we have no idea if they've got Ebola or not. And that was right there in that leaked CBP report that you guys can pull up. I'm sorry, I should have printed it and brought it. I meant to. And this follows up to my biggest concern. As a teacher, all these people coming across are going to flood my classroom. I'm already at about 30 students in my classroom, and this is there's not going to be the resources available, or we're going to have to flood a bunch more money into it. Taxes for homes are going to go up, and we don't even know if these people are the people coming in, bless their hearts, because they want to come to a free nation where they've got their liberties and where they're at. I understand the plight. We don't have the resources for this coming in, and then we're going to have students in our classroom that we don't know if they're going to be spreading Ebola to our children. We don't know if we're going to get tuberculosis coming across to our
I
children.
think tuberculosis is a greater concern than Ebola. Ebola is Western Africa. Sure, there could be people coming from who knows where, because the southern border is right now so porous. But tuberculosis is a greater concern that I have.
So federal law says that all these kids get a free education. It's not like I can say, oh, I can't teach you because of the situation. We have to put them in our schools. And so I'm actually bringing this up to a lot of the elected officials here, the school representatives here. Why don't you guys have some kind of investigation per child to make sure that they are legally living within our school district, and find out and do it for every single child, because you can't specify one child or the other. So that way, on a local level, we have some kind of teeth to make sure that we're not putting sick kids into an already burdened system, so we can have a better education and a healthier education for our children. We wouldn't want to have this particular school itself face this kind of threat or threat on our resources.
Well, there already are rules in place that require that a child attend school in his or her attendance zone, unless of the issue under active with progress of a child left behind. Their school is judged to be a failing school, in which case they can transfer to another school. But it is already, I mean, that's not federal law, but I know this because that someone who lived next door to me actually misrepresented where their child lived and got into a great deal of difficulty and then wanted me to bail them out. I said, I can't do that, it's not a federal issue. So he does, I mean, people do, attendance zones are taken very, very seriously. I mean, I've not talked to people here, but I know in other areas of the county that's a very, judged to be a very serious violation when it occurs, and can create all kinds of difficulty. But I don't disagree with you. I mean, the issue of infectious disease is one that has certainly caught my attention right from the start of this. very anxious about some of the things that I've seen going down the border, going down to Lackland Air Force Base. It is of great concern. Kids in Central America, as it turns out, actually have pretty good vaccination rates for things like DPT and measles. They don't get vaccinated for meningitis as children in our countries do, so that is a potential problem that could face us in the future. Tuberculosis is, as you know, if you get a case of multiple drug-resistant tuberculosis in your school, that is a big deal. Why I told the head of the CDC, don't minimize this. Don't be dismissive when people talk to you about their concerns, because if the cat gets out of the bag, it's going to be on you. And then, of course, all of that got subsumed with the Ebola patients coming back, and I haven't had a chance to follow up with them, but it is something that I am taking very, very seriously. The threat of potential, rather, for infectious disease because of people coming across the border.
I guess I've got one last thing to bring up. I know, I've said that once. The last thing I want to bring up is the gentleman who was just here, he brought up points that I personally disagree with, but the overall message at the end I do agree with, is that there's too much federal stuff going on. We could make it all stay local oriented.
There you go.
Federations or big programs and just make it local.
Federal agencies are too large. The gentleman who talked about Glass-Steagall, too big to fail. Right now, you've got a Department of Health and Human Services that's too big to work. That is the problem. And, thank you. I appreciate your passion this evening.
Hi, my name is Sandra Sheridan. I live here in Trophy Club, have been for about 18 years now. First of all, I want to thank you personally for your support of our veterans. My husband is one, and you helped us, so we really appreciate your help on that. I have really two things, and they're kind of like at opposite ends, so I'll start with maybe one first and see where we go with that. I don't want to take up everybody's time. Where do we stand with the pipeline coming down from Canada? Where's that going to end up? Is it going to happen? Is it not going to happen? You know, it seems to get a little ball rolling, and we seem to be making some headway, and then it gets put off. Is the president going to completely ignore it until he's out of office and let the next guy deal with it? Will it be too late then?
No, I mean, basically, it's built from Tulsa down to the Gulf Coast. The next president, look, if Bill Clinton were president today, this thing would be being built. He wouldn't have hesitated. He wouldn't have hesitated. In 2012, going into an election year, you don't think Bill Clinton would have done this and stood up there shoulder to shoulder with the union guys and said, here's what I'm doing for you? Oh, absolutely. Now, the president, for whatever reason, feels differently. There is a very vocal part of the environmental left that has his ear on this. I can't tell you that I have any inside knowledge, but it has been so long and so protracted that I don't see it changing before he leaves office. I do think, you know, it's hard to say this, but even if Hillary Clinton were elected, he would proceed with the pipeline. He would proceed. He wouldn't hesitate.
There really isn't any good reason not to have it. There's pipelines all over our country, and so far our corn is still being eaten, and our tomatoes are still growing, so. Okay, the other is, I think maybe this is an age thing. Sometimes I get a feeling that our morale in the country is kind of plummeting. People are very discouraged. We don't get a lot of answers to any questions. There's more questions, there's more indecision, no decision, put off, take it under advisement. But we don't get answers, and the older you get, I guess, the more maybe you worry about stuff. But it's almost like you don't want to put the news on because you're going to find everything that you're going to scream at the TV about and think, well, how come there isn't? Yeah, a lot.
Maybe it is an age
You know, Where's it all going to go? Is this going to snowball? Are we going to crash and burn? What's going to happen to us? You've got your finger on a pulse. You're in Washington. Tell us, what's going to happen? This isn't getting any better for any of us.
You'll remember the deep dark days of the malaise of the Carter administration. And I was just finishing up a residency at Parkland Hospital, and I honestly didn't know the world that I was going to emerge into, where I was finally to a point where I was through with my education and could start earning a living. And all I heard out of the president was, well, too bad about the future. And then it all changed. Ronald Reagan was sworn in, the sun came up, morning in America, and the great 8 to 12 years that followed after that. So things do change. Sometimes they change for the worse, sometimes they change for the better. I'm optimistic. I mean, this country is crying out for leadership. There is certainly seem to have gone through a period where we just sort of drag up the same guys that we tried before and it didn't work. And I supported some of them as their runs for president. I think this year is going to be an entirely, from a Republican perspective, I think it's going to be an entirely different equation. Democrats, yeah, I think they're pretty much stuck with Hillary until something else happens. But on the Republican side, I do think you're going to see the emergence of some very vibrant, viable young leaders, and I think that's going to be good for the country.
Well, all right, let's hope so.
There's a land of perpetual hope. Thank you. Thanks for being here.
Good evening. Thank you for being here. I'm Jeanette Tiffany with Trophy Club, and this will be a very quick answer.
Sure.
This is a procedure question. And so the issue is, Obama takes action on immigration in the next 2 weeks. And should then the Republicans take Congress and the Senate in November, what is their recourse for Obama's action on his own in these next 2 weeks? Is there a recourse?
Yes. And the recourse, again, on a procedural question, would be the funding for the fiscal year expires on September 30th. And the ability, I mean, no one wants to go through what we went through last October, wasn't all that successful. At the same time, I think there are enough nervous people in the Senate right now that they would understand that whatever funding bill comes forward, a continuing resolution, omnibus, minibus, whatever it's called, would have to include the language that would not permit the action that was taken unilaterally by the president.
Thank you.
My name is Linda Mills, and I'm from Trophy Club, and I'd like to address something that was stated about the Glass-Steagall. Having worked under the Glass-Steagall for 45 years, almost, about 35 years at least, under it, and now under the new administrations, I can tell you that there are parts of the Glass-Steagall that were very, very good. But there were parts of the Glass-Steagall that were so antiquated that they had to be replaced with all the modern things that we have today. And the things that we are seeing in the new laws, there are some things there that are really essential to each and every person that's in this room. You don't realize that parts of the new bill actually help you in the way your accounts are handled and funded throughout these different institutions. It wasn't all the trading side that was dangerous in this new law. With rewriting of some of the things that we put into place now.
Just when you say the new law, what are you referring to? Dodd-Frank?
When they Dodd-Frank, yes. And when they eliminated all Glass-Steagall, there were some good parts of Glass-Steagall, not a lot, but you can't just put that bill back in place because it will destroy what has provided some very, very good techniques, technology, and things like that for the people today that we could not do between the banks and the financial institutions previously. So there's a lot of reasons why this has been a very good thing, but there were some very bad things in it. It was not written, or it wasn't restructured, I should say, for the banking industry that would put in some protective measures. And there's a lot of protective measures that can be placed on Wall Street that will avoid the crash, as we call it. But it wasn't just that created some of that. We have to also look back at the Fannie Mae's and the Freddie Macs and the fundings and the way those were working. They had a tremendous amount, if not 100% to do with the mortgage crashes. And that's what really brought us through that last combustion that we had that just brought the market down tremendously. So there's a lot involved in that, and I agree with you. We can't go backward. But what we can do, I think, is to make sure that we write legislation that protects against the trading, in a lot of cases, that the banks are able to do now that they couldn't do. And I think that's one thing. I think, is that what you were trying to kind of lend to when you were making your statement?
But we didn't actually cover Fannie and Freddie. There is legislation to unwind those government-sponsored enterprises. And realistically, it's time to do that.
Yes, they need to be gone. I agree with that. Just one other point that has been brought up so many times is about the impeachment. And I think people have to really understand that this next election is critical. We've got to stay on top of it, because if we change the Senate as to who controls it, we have a much better chance of maybe impeachment, if that were to be the direction. Am I wrong?
Well, again, you have a 66 vote threshold for removal. So, I mean, that's...
We'd still have 24, right? And then we wouldn't have to pay him to have been a lousy president for the rest of his life. I don't need to get another
Are you paying for Bill Clinton today to be an ex-president?
And what now?
Are you paying for Bill Clinton in his retirement? Yes, you are.
Yes, I am, and that's why I don't want him to get it either.
All right, I rest my case.
Kirk should never be paid. So, aside from this. And then the other thing that I'd like to mention is that we do very much appreciate what you do.
Thank you. Very kind.
The situation in Congress and in the United States today, I think, is unprecedented for at least 200 years of how much there's been going on that has been corrupt. We don't only have the IRS, we have the VA, we have and we can all list that, and I won't do that. But I know that that's a challenge for each of you who are there, who are trying to do the very best you can do. And I personally want to thank you.
All right, thank you for your time.
I thought
long time no see.
Huh?
Long time no see. I'm glad you're back.
My name is Eddie Moore. I'm from Roanoke. I didn't say that before, but let me just respond real quickly to what she said.
I wondered if you might.
The rules, the Paul Volcker rules, the Frank Dodd bill, it doesn't work. It hasn't protected us since it went into effect. It's not protecting us now. The ring fencing that they refer to, it doesn't work. Wall Street is going to do whatever they want to do. And it's not going to be good for us. Now, I didn't come up here to talk about that.
Okay.
I wanted to ask you a question about the 9/11 Commission report. Are you aware of the Walter Jones resolution to declassify the 28 pages that have been classified under Bush Cheney, and Obama promised the victims of the tragedy to declassify them, but he was lying. He didn't do it. Have you read those pages?
You know, I'm going to have to tell you, I don't remember. I mean, 9/11 Commission report came out in 2004,
right?
And of course, I did read the 9/11 Commission report when it came out. I did go over and review a lot of classified material at that time, but I don't know if the redacted portion.
These 28 pages refer to who financed 9/11, and it has been classified. Now, you as a congressman can go in and read the pages. You can't come out and tell us what it says.
That's right.
But you can get on board. Walter Jones, one of your colleagues from, I think, North Carolina,
has sponsored a resolution to declassify them. My question is, would you be willing to go read the pages? It doesn't take long to read 28 pages. And get on board with Walter Jones to help declassify them so we can all read them.
I will answer the first part of your question. Yes, of course, I will be willing to go over those papers.
I appreciate that very much.
Thank you.
And Congressman, we're down to our last two, so.
Okay.
Right on time.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Burgess, I have a real straightforward question. I'm wondering why President Obama hasn't intervened on that young Marine sergeant. Foreign aid to Mexico is about $500 million. It would seem to me that he could get on the phone and call the president down there in Mexico and use some leverage on him. This guy made a wrong turn. Definitely, in my mind, it wasn't his fault. Even if it was, he didn't intend to go to Mexico. Instead, we have to listen to Bergdahl and his parents in the Rose Garden on a photo op, which annoys me no end. And this guy, Bergdahl, apparently is not a hero. It appears that he left his post.
Well, his case aside, it's the turning loose of the 5 Taliban criminals that occurred in exchange.
Exactly.
If you can get rid of 5 Taliban criminals, let's get...
Do you have any idea why President Obama hasn't intervened?
No. Ed Poe, who's a member of Congress from the Humboldt area, sent a letter, which I signed on to. We are still waiting for a response. You're right, it's time to turn up the heat.
We need to keep the pressure on. I also have one other question. Apparently, they're saying that all of these illegal immigrant children that are coming across our border are funneling up through Guatemala and crossing over into Mexico. If I can read a map, there's only about a 400-mile border between Guatemala and Mexico. And if Mexico is our friend and they're taking all this money from us, why can't they seal the border right there?
Seems like a logical alternative, doesn't it? 1,200 miles versus 400 miles. I don't disagree with you. I saw the story on CNN of it looked like gondola boats coming across the river. Pay $1.30 and you get transported into Mexico and you're off on your journey up north. It seems like it'd be a fairly straightforward thing to interrupt that process.
Seems easy.
Now, I do need to tell you this. The numbers are down. Clay Jenkins said he's going to bring 2,000 kids to Dallas County. And then late last week he said, no, I'm not, because they're able to take care of the military bases. And then a day later they said, no, we're not having to house children at the military bases any longer. So I'm in the process of trying to figure that out. The numbers, in fact, may be down, and I had this discussion with someone here earlier tonight. In 2005 and 2006, when President Bush called up the National Guard on the Texas border, it had an immediate effect on the people who were the human traffickers who were bringing people across. They don't want to mess with the United States military. They understand how hazardous that can be to their health. Now, it may not last, but Governor Perry's calling up the National Guard. We have had a substantial effect on people bringing people north to the Rio Grande and sending them across. Now, I don't know what the upstream effects are, and it may mean that there are people being held in stash houses in Mexico in terrible conditions, and we'll learn about that. But it has, I think, just the presence of the National Guard has had an effect. Just the fact that we have talked about it a lot for this past month. I know everybody's frustrated that all we do is talk, but just talking about it for the last month may have changed the equation. But I got to tell you, the one thing that would have changed things almost immediately is if the president had gone to the border every television camera in the Western Hemisphere would have been trained on him after he came out of thanking the Customs and Border Patrol and FEMA folks for doing his job for him down there. When he came out and held the press conference, he looked at the cameras and said to the mothers and fathers of Central America, do not send your children on this dangerous journey. They could get hurt, they could get killed, and we will send them back. That one shut it off right here and now. I wish he'd done it. Right before we start our last question, I want to take just a moment and introduce the staff who's with me this evening. They don't work for me, they work for you, and it is important that you know who they are. Several of them are down from the Washington office. Kelly Strickland, who is my chief of staff, and Katie Allen, who does a lot of the healthcare and the veterans issues. Amy Baker, who I've lost. Oh, there's Jamie, right in front of me. Who's also a legislative assistant. Amy's job is to make sure the camera is right, the microphone's right. So anything that you look on YouTube and it doesn't look good, Jamie, it's his fault. Jill Shatson is here. She's communications director. We do have a number of interns who are here with us tonight. Logan Davidson. Logan is from the University of North Texas. Taylor Disnick, Warrendale Academy, a senior this year. Thank you. Robbie Hyman, who's from Pennsylvania State University. Sorry, I didn't mean to get sidetracked. And Laura Peavy, also from the University of North Texas. Laura's actually signed on for a second stint. She did an internship in Washington and is now doing a communications internship in the district office. And then finally, the district staff who's here, Eric With, most of you know. Eric and a lot of and is Nathan Everett, who is our outreach coordinator. And Melanie Corus at the back to do the constituent services in the district office. And Robin Vaughn, is Robin in the room or she's still out front? Okay, Robin and Joe are out front. Thank them all the way up because they do a great job for me as well. Okay, thank you for letting me get that housekeeping detail out of the way. The floor is yours. You're finishing this up, so make it good.
I'll try. Thank you. First of all, I do want to thank you for your service to this district, and I want you to know on behalf of all people of faith that we pray for you a lot. Great job representing us. I think we've heard several times tonight people mentioning things. I even heard you mutter a few things regarding the failure of the federal government, just about everywhere it gets involved. And I want to implore you to continue the things that were really emphasized back with the Contract with America in the early 90s, dismantling of a lot of the unnecessary government agencies, things that Governor Perry brought up when he was running for office, that he couldn't quite remember all of, but we'll forgive him for that. And so I just want to encourage you to continue in that vein and be bold.
Where was the Department of Commerce if you couldn't remember? And he's right. It serves no useful purpose.
So, you know, if there's ever a moment when you feel kind of like, oh, this might not come across right, go for it. We don't believe half the junk we hear on TV and the news anyway. They're going to talk bad about you regardless. So be bold, be conservative, be constitutional. And legislative thing I think you're on the record as supporting a flat tax, is that correct? I'm sorry, my name is Leland Johnson. I'm from the American Trophy Club. I'm actually a big proponent of getting rid of the IRS. It's still a federal imposed tax on income, which I kind of find immoral. Not kind of, I do find it immoral. And there's been a bill that's been around for a while, and you're familiar with H.R. 25, the fair tax bill. And I am very much on board with that. I know several people in this district that are. Our numbers are growing. And if it came down to it and that bill had the sponsorship, would you sign on to that piece of legislation as it stands?
Let me just say this. First off, as far as the flat tax is concerned, I mean, that is, my predecessor was a big believer in the flat tax. I bought his book. in the 1990s. I read it, so this makes so much sense. I don't understand why we don't do it. I asked him early in 1996, when will we get the flat tax enacted? And he said he expected President Dole to sign it shortly after it was inaugurated. Didn't work out the way we intended. I think for that kind of fundamental tax reform, which I believe that you have to have fundamental tax reform to get past some of these problems that we have. That's really going to take the referendum of the presidential election. I was actually hopeful this last go-around when both Newt Gingrich and Governor Perry said, I want to support a flat tax. You know, it's that old Rodney Dangerfield joke that he tells, you know, he goes home and finds his wife packing up, and he said, what, is there another man? And she says, there just has to be. I mean, there has to be something else other than what we're doing right now. So, the short answer to your question is, I believe in fundamental tax reform. I believe it is going to happen one day. I think it will take a referendum of the presidential election. It's not something you're likely to see the balance of this year or even next year after the midterms. But when we are evaluating presidential candidates, that's one of the things that I look for. Where are they on fundamental tax reform, and are they willing to fight for it?
So when we win the Senate back, and we will win the Senate back, and we get the White House back with someone with half a nugget of common sense, and let's say it came down to a flat tax versus the fair tax, and there was enough sponsorship for the fair tax to pass, would you, based on what you know right now, would you be willing to sign on to that at that time?
I will tell you my concern about the fair tax, and I talked to Dr. Linder about this a lot, and Rob Woodall, his successor in the House of Representatives, is on the Rules Committee with me, and we sometimes will do the debate, flat tax versus fair tax. And it is the issue of the having to amend the Constitution to undo the law that allowed the amendment that allowed the income tax to occur in the first place a little over 101 years ago. You know, it's hard to get a constitutional amendment. It's hard to get it passed. We've seen that on several occasions. So that's my concern. The last thing you want is both of them.
Right. Yeah.
Okay?
Definitely.
So that's like having a high pressure line. If you put a value-added tax or a consumption tax on top of an income tax, that would be the worst of all possible worlds. So that's why I'm hesitating in answering your question, because I am concerned about, I don't want there to be both regimes running simultaneously. But I'm for fundamental tax reform.
Thank you for your answer.
Thank you. I don't know when this has ever happened. We are right on time. I mean, I promised I would be out of here before 9 o'clock. And it looks like we're going to do it. Thank you so much for being here this evening. Thanks for your participation. Democracy is a participatory sport. Sometimes it's a full body contact sport, but it is participatory, and I appreciate you all being here this evening and appreciate you sharing your thoughts. God bless every one of you, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.